Hey, what's up? Chris Sider here. Today we're going to be talking about how to make your ex notice you again after a breakup. Now, the first thing you should always do before watching one of my videos is to actually figure out if this process is worth your time. Believe me, I've been doing this for almost 7 years, and one of the biggest mistakes I see people making is trying to get their ex back in a situation that really doesn't favor them. So if you're wondering, wait, how do I know if I have a chance of getting my ex back? I've got great news for you. On our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, I've actually pieced together a special quiz designed to answer this exact question for you. Basically, all you have to do is simply look in the description link below this YouTube video, click on the link you see there, and it will take you to a page that is our quiz. It's going to ask you questions about you, your ex, and your time together. And then based on how you answer those questions, we're actually going to be able to tell you roughly what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, all you have to do if you want to take the quiz, it should only take you about 2 minutes and it's free, is simply look in the description link below this YouTube video. Click on the link and we will get you taken care of. All right. Let's start talking about how to make your ex notice you.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about how to get an ex to notice you again. And I want to just assume that we're dealing with an ex who wants nothing to do with you. They aren't interested in talking to you. They aren't interested in getting back together. What would we have to do in a circumstance like this to get that person to notice you again? And I think it's important to understand the distinction between noticing. Right? When you say you want someone to notice you again, you don't want them to just notice you. You want them to notice you and then let you know about it in some way, usually positively, by reaching out to you, telling you, or complimenting you, or flirting with you. That's what you're really after, and that's what I want to focus this video on. How do we accomplish that? And there's really 4 core concepts or key concepts I want you to understand if you want an ex to notice you, all right? So here's the first one. The first way or concept that I want you to understand is it's important for you to become noticed after you've evolved. Now, when I'm dealing with my clients and I'm trying to teach them how they should go about getting an ex back, the first thing I always say is that you need to evolve, right? Now, a lot of people take this as me saying you need to change who you are. No, that's not it at all. I'm a big believer that there's certain events that occur in our lives that can spark us or cause us to take action and evolve and improve ourselves, right? So, for example, a breakup is a good example of this, right? Over time, ideally, after this breakup occurs, in a perfect world, you're going to kind of go through an evolution of self. You're going to come out of this better than ever, right? Now, the issue is most people I deal with, when they want their ex to notice them, they don't wait enough time or don't do enough things to have a significant evolution, right? They ask immediately after the breakup, hey, notice me, notice me, notice me. And there's not really a good juxtaposition, or there's not a really great parity between having your ex look at you a couple of weeks ago when they broke up with you and looking at you a couple of weeks later when you've not really changed at all. You're still just as desperate. You're still just as sad. You're still just as depressed. You haven't done any kind of evolution. You have nothing to change the paradigm with. Now, you compare that to someone who actually goes through a process, which is this evolution of self, this idea of evolution of self in time is really weaved in throughout our process. If you compare someone who goes through a process and comes out the breakup and is better for it and has a lot more to offer and can change the paradigm and almost make their ex do kind of a double take, that's going to be a lot more effective than trying to get your ex to notice you at this point, right? So you want to go through this evolution of self before you try to do anything to get your ex to notice you, right? And so the big thing to talk about here is how. How do you do that? Well, that's actually where the second concept comes into play, the no contact rule. I talk a lot about this on my website. I think it's even referenced in almost 70 to 80% of the articles I've written on my website. I've written an entire book about it. I've done multiple videos on this YouTube channel about it, and I'm not going to dive too much into what it is right here. I will give you a quick crash course version in a little bit, but what I want you to understand is when you look at this particular graphic I put together, this notice me graphic, the one thing between these two graphics right here that stays consistent throughout is time, right? And that's where the no contact rule comes into play. You can't evolve without time. Time is really, it's the one great currency that we have, and if we spend or use it wisely, we can evolve. We can come out of this with potentially a different perspective. It's interesting. I was watching an interview last night of a professional rock climber. Now, this is a professional rock climber unlike any I've ever seen in my life before. This kid literally goes to 3,000-foot high cliffs and climbs them without a rope. It's called free soloing. It's the most dangerous thing to do, in my opinion, in the world. And this kid does it. Right? And I was watching an interview and was listening to him talk, and he just has a different perspective on life than most of us, right? He's kind of practiced and risked his life doing this really amazing human achievement, and it gives him a different perspective on life. It potentially makes him value it more, but you can just tell by looking in his eyes, he kind of has evolved past us. He kind of doesn't sweat the little things, right? And I think that feeling, that vibe that I get from him is as a result of this event of him doing this very, very dangerous rock climb without any kind of gear. One misstep and you're dead. It's over, right? The no contact rule gives you time to evolve, right? That's what you're supposed to do. Now, the thing with the no contact rule is when I'm actually teaching the no contact rule to people, I'll sit there and say, okay, here's what the no contact rule is. It's usually a time period anywhere from 21 to 45 days where you ignore your ex on purpose, right? The intent there is to make your ex miss you, but at the same time, allowing you to cultivate your own life. Now, when I tell that definition to people, the first and probably only thing that they hear is, oh, cool, this will make my ex miss me. They forget arguably the most important part, which is the cultivation of their own life. It's a lot more effective if your ex is noticing you after a kind of evolution after the no contact rule, after you've done something, after you have a different perspective, after you can kind of have a little bit of a different demeanor, look better. I don't know. There's all sorts of things you can do. Feel better about yourself. That kind of just plays through everything. It's going to be a lot more effective if your ex notices you then as opposed to right after the breakup, which is why most people fail, right? And the no contact rule allows you that time to do those things. So that's the second concept that I wanted to talk about with you today. The third concept is actually to utilize social media to its fullest. Not a lot of people realize this, but social media is one of the greatest weapons you have for making someone notice you. One thing that we know, especially when it comes to Facebook, because Facebook is the most popular social media platform in my opinion, is around 90% of exes after they go through a breakup will keep an eye on your profile for a couple of months, right? So this gives you an opportunity to actually do something or tell a story that doesn't include them. Now, the best example I can give you is, have you ever sort of witnessed those kids who are sitting inside and have to do homework or their parents won't let go out and they have to watch their friends have fun without them? They're literally, sitting at the window watching their friends have fun without them, and they feel like they're on the outside looking in. This is the effect that social media can have, especially if you tell a story without your ex. Your ex is expecting you to be depressed, sad, angry, and they expect your posts to kind of reflect that. That's why when we're looking at our ex's profiles, we start obsessing about, they posted this song and it's a really sad song, or they're saying all these real things, or they're liking this other girl's photos, or they're liking this other guy's photos. What does it mean? It's because we're dissecting every little thing we're doing, but they're also doing the same thing to you, right? So if you play into the narrative that they think is going on with you, if you post something depressed, you try to make them jealous by liking someone else's photos, which can have mixed results. You post a song that's really sad or something. That narrative makes sense to them, and it's really not as effective as them watching you have fun without them. You want to give them this feeling that they're on the outside looking in, that they're seeing you have fun, and they're not a part of it, because that makes them confront the reality of what it's like to be alone, what they're missing out on. So using social media is an indirect way to get them to notice you, and it's one of the most effective ways. But perhaps the most important thing for you to understand is this idea of ruthless actions and kind words. Now, I've been doing this for around 7 years. It's a long time. I've coined a lot of interesting phrases and terms in my time. I've coined something called the good feelings, bad feelings theory. I've coined things, arguably the most important and most revolutionary thing or term that I've coined is the ungettable girl. Right now, this ungettable girl idea can also be applied to men, so it can also be kind of the ungettable guy. But the premise is pretty simple. It takes the fact that humans want what we can't have and places it to the max. The problem is when I would say, oh, you need to be ungettable, I would never really have a way to teach people to be ungettable. I mean, how do you become ungettable? And I was thinking today, well, what are the defining characteristics of someone who's ungettable? Well, it's that they're ruthless in their actions, but they're also kind. They have kind words, right? And so when I'm actually dealing with clients and stuff, the biggest mistake I see them making is that if you kind of look at it like a scale, they weigh it down with too much in one area, right? We want to have like a balanced sort of way that we go about it. So a lot of times when I tell people to be ungettable, they're really ruthless with their actions and they're not kind enough. They're way too ungettable to the point where their ex is so intimidated they're not going to even try to get them back. Instead, what they need to be doing is have a completely balanced ruthless action and kind word scale. Now, what do I mean by ruthless actions? I don't think I really have to go too deep into the tank to explain what kind words are. But what is ruthless actions? Well, in my mind, ruthless actions is having the ability to be ruthless in your execution of the necessary actions to get your ex back. So what do I mean by that? Well, a ruthless action would be implementing a no contact rule and sticking to it. Staying disciplined to stick to it. You're ruthless with that action. You believe in it 100%. You're not going to stop. Another ruthless action is something that's really hard for people to do. You're having a great conversation with your ex, right? Everything's vibing. The conversation's just flowing perfectly. And you know you're at this point where you're thinking, I don't want this to end. But you know you have to make it end. You know you have to leave your ex wanting more. A ruthless action would be to stop the conversation short to leave the ex wanting more. That's a ruthless action. Another one is having the ability to understand you have to be willing to risk losing your ex forever. That's a ruthless action. Being ruthless with your actions can be a positive thing. But if you're only ruthless with your action, then you're not going to really give your ex the vibes that they want, right? If you're always ignoring them, if you're always seemingly ending conversations short, if you're never kind to them during your conversations, if you're always kind of trying to do things to make them want you more, trying to play hard to get, you're going to be too hard to get and they're going to give up. That's where kind words come into play. When I met my wife for the very first time and we were dating, I'll never forget, if you don't know, I lived in Texas, she lived in Pennsylvania, we were in a long distance relationship, right? So I would go visit her every month or so, and then she'd visit me every month or so. And there was a time that I went to Philadelphia and she picked me up at the airport. And we're driving back to her house, and she mutters this word to me. She tells me that she's a sweet bitch. And I'm looking at her, and I kind of think to myself, why? That's weird. Why would she call herself that? And I don't think I really realized what she meant by that until maybe this moment right now when I'm teaching you. It's this. A sweet bitch is someone who's ruthless with their action and kind with their words, right? Someone who's just a bitch is someone you don't want to be around, right? Someone who's rude all the time, angry all the time, basically just ruthless. But that's why she said she was a sweet bitch. I know it's a weird thing for me to say, but she's sweet. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, she's kind. Her whole demeanor most of the time is sweet, but where it's warranted, she's not afraid to be ruthless. And I think that's an important thing for you to understand. A lot of time, you're unbalanced, right? You're either way too kind to your ex or you're way too ruthless to your ex. You need to achieve that perfect balance to become ungettable.